Thank you guys for coming out. That also means a lot. I have just a very short word about the film that I would like to share with you before the screening begins. And I have written it because English is not my first language, so sorry about this, but I'll have to read it. So the film you are about to see is based on the life of Jean Corbo, who went through the events depicted in the film in Montreal, Quebec, in 1966. There are, of course, some obvious local aspects to his story, but I and the people involved in the making of this film always approached it as the universal tale of a boy struggling to find his voice, a tale of political commitment, and of the moral boundaries of radical action. So I hope, and I think that anybody can relate to the film through the trials, tribulations, and emotions through which go the all-too-human characters bringing this film to life. So enjoy, and I'll be back after the screening if you have any questions about the film. Monsieur Mathieu, if anyone has any questions.
Well, I'll ask you right away. Is there controversy about Jean Corbo now? Is he a hero to some in Quebec? Is he well known?
Jean Corbo is, I think, he's a widely forgotten figure in history. When he died, it got a lot of press coverage, and and we don't get to that point in the film, but shortly after his death, all of the members of his cell got arrested, and there were these trials that lasted for 5 years actually, and but people don't really remember him, and I thought his story had a very I thought the story was interesting, but I thought it had a very contemporary aspect to it, and so that's why I thought it was interesting to address it today.
It was interesting to address it today, absolutely. Any questions? En français? Gênez-vous pas?
The speech at the end, which is read over, was that genuine?
The speech at the end that was read over, was it genuine?
Yeah. Yes. So that's it's a letter that was written by Mathieu, which is a character in the film, the leader of the group. Who's so I kept in the film. I kept the pseudonyms of the historical characters because they had this kind of clandestine operation and they didn't use their real names, but. Mathieu is Pierre Vallière, so maybe some people know him or not. And he wrote this letter to Jean Corbo's family, and it was published in La Cognée, the Axe, their little newspaper. And I found this letter actually quite late in the process of writing the film, and when I read it, the first time I read it actually. I didn't really know what to do with it because I thought there was a part of the letter that was, to me, that was really inspiring because it talks about political commitment. And it talks about going forward with your own ideas, and at the same time, which is for me, which is inspiring, and at the same time, there's something appalling about the letter because he has this kind of act where he says, well, we didn't really know him. We're not the ones who asked him to do this. He did this on his own, and I thought the letter encompassed the complexity of political commitment and of radical action, because. For my part, I come from a completely different generation than the one in which Jean was brought up, and I come from a. Is it still working? speak loud.
Oh, was he?
So I come from a from a generation of cynicism to some extent. People my age are mostly apolitical, and something that I thought was really interesting with this group was that they had a real impression that they could change the world in which they were living. And of course we can, there are lots of questions to ask about the way they set out to change the world in which they were living, which was through violence. But the fact that they thought that they could have an impact in the world in which they were living, this is something that I thought was interesting and that we kind of have lost today. And so that talked to me a lot. And there's something of that in the letter. But at the same time, again, there's something completely revolting in the fact that they're doing as if they didn't know him, and they're actually, addressing they're talking to the family, and so I thought this really encompassed the complexity of the issues that are at play in the film. So at some point, I knew the letter existed. I didn't know what to do with it. At some point, I had this idea. So I should just take the very inspiring parts, because people won't really understand why they're distancing themselves from Jean. And this did not make sense, of course. And I just had this. At some point, I just realized that putting the whole text and these images, where you have this kind of late confrontation between Mathieu, the leader, and Jean, who has died, to me it just gave a great weight and a great meaning to the film. So.
Please.
On the extract of the election night, where Danielle Johnson is asked about why the Liberals got a plurality of the vote, and he blames it on English speakers and the Jewish vote, strangely reminiscent of something another politician said 30 years later on another election night. What was your purpose in focusing on that extract of his comments?
I guess there's. I think. Again, it's something that at some point you do some research and you find things and you stumble onto things, and I think it was very telling of the era, first of all. We have at the beginning of the film when Jean arrives in his new school, and people, so you're an Italian, and they're making fun of him, and they're finding it very funny that he's an Italian. I thought that the excerpt with Danielle Johnson it put this into perspective. I mean, Quebec at this time was a quite openly racist society at this time, and I think it resonated with an important part of the story for me, which is the identity struggle and the identity question in Quebec. And and so it resonated. And of course, I mean, as you said, you listen to that, and fast forward to 1995, during the second referendum, Jacques Parizeau said something that's, it's almost exactly the same thing. And I had this. Hearing that and knowing about what had happened in 1995, and of course, watching what's going on in Quebec right now, there was this impression of a standstill that was that I thought had to be again addressed, and and so I don't know if it answers your question, but
very good answer. I saw another hand, no? Please.
How long did it take to get all the funding for your film?
The funding was not that long actually. I think how long was it? It's less than a year maybe, because it's I think in Canada and in Quebec in particular, we're kind of fortunate that there's a very straightforward way of making films. And in Quebec, that way is that you apply for funding at SODEC, which is a provincial organization or institution, and then you apply for funding at Téléfilm Canada, which is like a federal equivalent. And if you have SODEC and Téléfilm, you can make your film, because the rest just falls into place. And so, we found a distributor, and then we applied for funding. And the first time we applied for funding, it didn't work, so we tried again 6 months later, and then the second time worked. So the funding in itself was not that long. The longer part was the actual research and the writing of the script. That was much longer.
For a historical note, BC Film used to invest. Please.
What stopped the funding the first time? Was it because of something in the script, or was it just a bad timing?
It's always a mystery to some extent, but no, they felt that the script was not at a point where they thought there was work that was left to do on the script, and so but it's a number of things, sometimes because I don't really want to get into the specifics, but there are so many things that get into play, because you can, at SODEC, for example, you can submit 3 times, okay? And if at the 3rd time you don't get funding, then that's it. And if that's it, that basically means that you take your script and you put it in the recycling bin, and it's the end of it. And so sometimes you get at this point where it's the end of the fiscal year, they don't have that much money left, and you have like 5 projects that are at their 3rd submission. And so it becomes delicate for them to say, well, these 5 projects will die, and we'll take this one, which is at his 1st submission. So there's a number of things, but of course, they'll always find very good reasons to tell you that you should work on this part of the script, or so.
Thanks.
Please.
I just wanted to ask you about the casting. I thought the acting was really good. Were they all professional actors?
So thank you for the actors. They're all professional actors, yes. One thing that struck me very early on with this story was the age of not the characters, but the persons that were involved in the story. Jean Corbo was 16 years old when he died. His friends were 16 or 17 years old. The guy that builds the bomb and that brought Jean to his death was 21 years old. You had other guys that were 19. The oldest ones were 26 and 27, which were Mathieu, Pierre Vallière was 27, very young age. And for me, this played an important part in the story. Again, just because I was thinking about Jean and I was trying to put myself in his shoes, and I was just remembering when I was 16 years old, and was there a cause for which I would have gone out with a bomb? And I didn't find such causes, and so that was very shocking to me. And so very early on, I had this very strong impression that since it was so important to me that these guys were so young, that the actors had to be the age of their historical counterpart. Yeah. Because I think very often in films or in television, right, these years, I mean, you'll have a 16-year-old character, and he's played by a 25-year-old actor, and I think personally that age, and especially young age, there's a kind of naivete and innocence that I think you lose as you grow old, and that you cannot act. And so I had this very strong impression that the actors had to be the exact same age as the characters they were playing. And so I worked with a casting director, and I told her that I wanted to have young actors. And of course, the first thing that they'll submit to you is you'll have this whole list of like 30 actors, and they're all over 20. And then they always say, well, but they look very young. Yes, but I don't want them to look young. I want them to be young. And so, but this point came true at some point. And so we had a very standard audition process. And I saw, all of the actors, like the young actors that had some experience, because I didn't want to go the non-actor route, because I think sometimes, personally I think it's one or the other, which means if you go with non-actors, you should cast only non-actors, and if you go with professional actors, you should cast actors that have some experience, because there's a disconnect if you don't do that, in my opinion. And there were some older parts which I knew I wanted some seasoned actors. For example, Tony Nardi, who plays Jean's father, I knew I wanted to work with him very early on, and so because of that, I decided to go with professional actors. And so I saw many of them. For Jean Corbo, I saw, I don't remember exactly how many, but it's more than 75 actors that I saw. And funnily enough, Anthony, who plays Jean, he's the first actor that I saw during the auditions, and he was really good. But of course, you're not going to hire the first actor you see, and so I just wanted to make sure that he was the best one out there. But all through the process, I was always comparing the actors to him, and so once I had seen everyone, it took 5 seconds, and I said, well, Anthony's the right one. And so for all the actors, we did this audition process, and that's how I found them all. Yeah.
Well, they were fantastic.
Thank you.
Please.
This film has really made me think. I actually was in Montreal doing the FLT process. And my question to you, do you think that this incident was what started, the quiet revolution, as they call it, that started the actual political change in Quebec?
Not really, because the Quiet Revolution, which is the Quiet Revolution for me starts in 1959 when Maurice Duplessis dies. So it's a very specific part of history, but there was this prime minister in Quebec, which is called Maurice Duplessis, which had this very tight grip on the government in the province, and was there for a long time, almost 20 years all in all. And we often refer to the period during which he was a prime minister as the dark ages of Quebec, and that's because it was a period when Quebec was extremely conservative, extremely religious, and it was a very closed society. And so he died in 1959, and for me, the start of the Quiet Revolution is when Duplessis dies. And actually, but your question is interesting, because I think like the next question would be, when does the Quiet Revolution ends? And people don't agree on this, and some people will say, well, the Quiet Revolution ends in 1970. And the Quiet Revolution is like a period in history where Quebec just modernized itself at an extremely rapid pace, and we created all these different institutions like ministries and. Yeah, exactly. The church. There's this fall of the power of the church over the everyday life in Quebec, and so for my part, and I think that's why the film has this kind of I don't know. The 1966 for me is important, and for my part, I think the end of the Quiet Revolution is 1966. And why is that the end of the Quiet Revolution? Is that from 1959 to 1966, you have this unbelievable pace of change, and I think in 66, people just, they're kind of, there's this stop where people kind of gather their strengths, or ils reprennent leur souffle.
Yeah, they catch their breath.
They catch their breath, and then the question is, we've done all this, but is this enough? And where do we go from now, or from here? And for some people, I think, which is what the characters in the film thought, for some people, I mean, from the only way forward from there was to create, to make a country out of Quebec. And so, and so starting from there, anyway, it's very specific, but René Lévesque, which eventually became the founder of Parti Québécois, who organized the first referendum, he was in the Liberal Party in 1966, where there's this election that we see in the film, but he had this, this disconnect with Jean Lesage, who was the prime minister, and it's his last election with the Liberal Party, because in 66, after the election, he eventually left the Liberal Party to found the Mouvement Souveraineté Association, which is like what would become eventually Parti Québécois. So I think it's 1966 is like this very pivotal year, which for me marks the end of Quiet Revolution, and which defines the history of Quebec up until 1995, because I think that's, in 1995, where there's this second referendum that doesn't go through, for me that's the end of this era. You have the Dark Ages, then you have Quiet Revolution, then you have 1966 to 1995, which is this very vivid period of national struggle and national affirmation, and which ends up in 1995 with nothing, actually. And so, and I think right now we're still in like this post-1995 era, which is an era of nothingness, really. So.
On that happy note, no, please, in the back.
I'd like to mention, I thought it was interesting, is reading Médaille de la Terre France, and this is a very important part in these events. People were very, maybe more intellectual. They
Are you seeing, ma'am?
connected with the struggle of the colonization, the fight against colonization in North Africa, and Quebec, being French, they were quite connected with what was happening in France with the Algerian struggle, the struggle against the Algerian colonization and the rest of the Divided area. So I think that's quite interesting that it's quite prevalent in some of the scenes in the film that is reading outside also
Wretched of the Earth. Yeah. She's talking about.
I have a second question, if you don't mind. I'd like to know if his family was gave you up an input on his character, because his brother, I believe, is UQAM, is part of the UQAM, Université Québécois Montréal, as executive, or
Yeah, he's retired now, but.
So, was there any input from his family?
Yeah, I'll start with the family part. Obviously, yes, a huge part of the research I did was based on first-hand account by people that had lived through these events, members of FLQ that are still alive, and also members of the family. Jean's parents are dead, obviously, now. His brother, Claude Corbo, he's kind of a fairly well-known figure in Quebec. And Mr. Corbo didn't wish to be involved in the. He didn't wish to meet me. Actually, we had this fairly long written correspondence. This doesn't do emails, and he hesitated quite for quite a long time, and in the end he wasn't he couldn't talk about this, because I think when Jean died, it was like a huge jolt for the family, a shock, and it happened, and they basically they put like a lid on the boiling pot, and they never talked about it afterwards, and so it was a great shock for him. I met other members of the family, cousins and uncles, and so I had the chance to meet a number of other people from the family. The fact that Claude didn't want to meet with me, at first I thought it was a very I thought it was very bad at first, because I would have liked to have his input about what had happened. But in the end, it turned out, as being something positive, because the character of the brother of Jean in the film, it gave me some liberty to create this character, which I think is not that far from Claude, but which is not Claude, and which becomes this character that really is the opposite side to the same medal to Jean, which is he's someone who shares like a lot of political ideas with Jean, but he chooses a very different path, which is he doesn't go the radical action path. He goes the democratic path, and I think I thought that was very interesting. Counterpoint to Jean's commitment. And just a month ago or something like that, maybe 2 months ago, we screened the film for the family, and that was a moment where I was very, very nervous, and I was nervous because very early on I made this decision that for all of the characters, you always, when you do a historical piece like that, you have these pictures of the people that were involved, and generally you'll try to find actors that look alike the historical characters. But very early on, I decided not to go this way. First of all, because the characters are not that well known, and so I didn't think it would be like bothering that much. But also because I think at some point you end up finding actors that that their main quality is that they look like someone, and they don't necessarily have this internal I tried to find the essence of the characters, and I tried to find actors that could portray this essence, and that had this essence, instead of actors that were just lookalikes. And so I was nervous when I screened the film for the family, because I thought, well, they'll see the actors and they'll say, well, that's not my cousin, that's not my uncle, who are these people? But when the screening ended, the first thing that they said was, this is our family. We recognize it's the same internal dynamics. It's the same. It's the politics of the family, and so that was a very reassuring, but also very touching moment. And just very quickly to conclude on what you were talking about, The Wretched of the Earth, which is a book by Frantz Fanon. I think the excerpt from this book, and there's also excerpts from the Battle of Algiers, which is a Gillot Pontic Corbo film about the Algerian Revolution. I thought it was very important to put the film into context, because at some point when I met with Serge Demers, which is one of the FLQ members, there's one thing that he told me at some point which stayed with me, and he was, at the end of one of our meetings, he was telling me, well, if you do a film about this nowadays, what are people going to think? They'll think we were completely crazy, going out, putting bombs and all that, and and so, and of course, if you just look at it from the context of today, it's different. But if you put things into perspective, at the time when they were doing these things, this was a path of action that had some legitimacy to it, and that was part of the era. And so the excerpts from Wretched of the Earth, from Battle of Algiers, this is something that helped put the film into an international context, and so that we don't think that these people are just lunatics. It's that it's something that's going on at this time. So.
La dernière question, the last question, please.
I was just wondering how making this film has changed you, or changed the way you look at your own history.
That's a very good question. It's to be completely honest, when I first, I think I'm pretty much the first person in Quebec that does a film, or even like a book or a play, or on a subject matter that's close to FLQ, that has not lived through the events that I'm talking about. And I think so. I have this kind of this perspective. I think that people that touched on the subject before did not have. And to be quite honest, from my perspective, when I started researching the film, and the thing that resonated with me was this 16-year-old kid dying while planting a bomb for a terrorist organization, and I thought there was this opportunity to maybe to question the morality of the actions of the FLQ, because there's this kind of sympathy for what they do. But the more I researched it, and I hope the film is a witness to that, but the more I researched the story, and the more I kind of understood that, of course, I could not glorify the actions of the members of FLQ, because, dying while planting a bomb for any cause, I don't think is a good outcome or a positive outcome in any way. But there's one thing that I also very quickly that I realized is that it would be too easy to just to do a very quick condemnation of what they were doing, and the reason why that is, it's like I was saying earlier, is that for me, I was really again, coming from the generation of irony and cynicism, the more I scratched the surface and I researched the story, this idea that these guys and girls, that they thought they could change the world in which they were living, that was very inspiring for me. And this is something that I think it's an impression that I think we have lost, and that we should try to find again, without saying that we have to resort to violence, but having this idea that, that there are concrete gestures and actions that we can do that will have like an impact in the world in which we're living, and that will help us change the world in which we are. I think, this is inspiring, and I think we should at least maybe keep that in mind. And also, I think that's something that, Jean Corbo, who died when he was 16 years old. I mean, it's to me, his story has yet to be written, and I hope that if we can again gather some inspiration from what he did. So maybe this is a more interesting and inspiring way to conclude his story. So, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking